of Schliff Nova, a subsidiary of the National Glass and Abrasives company in Nava, where he stressed the need to speed up the integration of this unit into the process of strengthening national production and reducing imports of these products.
And the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has taken part in Kampala, Uganda, in the meeting of the Ministerial Commission of the Non-Aligned Movement on Palestine, held on the sidelines of the 19th Ministerial Meeting of the movement. In a speech delivered on this occasion, the Minister of State stressed that the first phase of the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip, while constituting an important step forward, must still be reinforced by an integrated approach that takes into account the urgent needs of the Palestinian people and, at the same time, creates the conditions for lasting peace in the region. In this context, he underlined that the success of this agreement depends on full compliance with all commitments made to consolidate the ceasefire, ensure the withdrawal of occupation forces, and guarantee unrestricted access to humanitarian aid. And more importantly, the ceasefire agreement must be accompanied by a serious and credible political process, speeding up the establishment of an independent and sovereign Palestinian state as a just, lasting, and definitive solution to the Zionist-Palestinian conflict. Let's listen to Mr. Attaf.
We meet today in the wake of encouraging developments marked by the signing of the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement, a development that has rekindled the hope for an end to the untold suffering inflicted upon the Palestinian people. This is indeed a crucial step in the right direction, but a step that must be consolidated through a comprehensive approach to address both the immediate needs of the Palestinian people and the long-term requirements of sustainable peace in the region. From our perspective, the success of this agreement depends not only on the full respect of all commitments made to uphold the ceasefire, to ensure the withdrawal of the Israeli forces, and to guarantee unhindered humanitarian access, but also, and most importantly, on pairing this agreement with a serious and credible political process that should lead to the establishment of an independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state within the framework of the two-state solution.
In the same context, the Minister of State argued that the time has come for the international community to recognize that the establishment of this state is not only a necessity to respond to legitimate Palestinian national aspirations, but a local, regional, and global imperative. The Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has held bilateral talks in Kampala, Uganda, with several foreign ministers of brotherly and friendly countries on the sidelines of the 19th Ministerial Meeting of the Non-Aligned Movement, according to a statement from the ministry. Ahmed Attaf met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Migration and Tunisians Abroad of the Republic of Tunisia, Mohamed Ali Nefti, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Serbia, Marko Duric, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Abbas Arakci, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez Paria, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Republic of Mozambique, Ms. Maria Manuela dos Santos Lucas. The United Nations has called on the Zionist entity to respect commitments made in the ceasefire agreement by notably allowing the unhindered entry of aid to the Gaza Strip. This came as the occupation authority has again delayed the reopening of Gaza's Rafah crossing with Egypt to allow for the movement of people and the funneling of aid. In a statement on Thursday, the occupation's army unit responsible for civilian matters in the occupied territory said coordination was underway with Egypt to set a date for reopening the Rafah crossing for movement of people after completing the necessary preparations. The same unit added that Rafah crossing will remain closed to aid, claiming that the truce deal did not include its reopening. All humanitarian supplies bound for Gaza, it said, would instead pass through the Karam Abu Salim crossing after the Israeli security inspections. Reacting the continued closing of the Rafah crossing, the representative of Hamas movement in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, said the following.
تعقيبا على تصريحات نتنياهو بشأن
In response to Netanyahu's statements regarding the delay in opening the Rafah crossing and his threat to reduce the entry of humanitarian aid, this policy reflects the approach of this fascist government, which aims to punish the residents of the Gaza Strip. We confirm that the bodies of the Israeli prisoners, whom the resistance was able to reach, were handed over immediately, while recovering the remaining bodies requires equipment and devices to remove the rubble, which are not currently available. The reason is that the occupation prevents their entry. Therefore, any delay in handing over the bodies is the full responsibility of the Netanyahu government. We in the Hamas movement confirm our commitment to the agreement and our keenness to implement it, while Netanyahu continues to procrastinate and not abide by what we agreed upon, and even obstructs the resistance efforts to reach the rest of the bodies. Here we note the state of the bodies of our martyrs who were detained by the occupation, which reflects the Nazism, sadism and criminality of the Zion-Nazi occupation.
إجرام الاحتلال الصهيونازي.
And the NGO Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, has announced that the health situation in the Gaza Strip is critical and that the ceasefire has been accompanied neither by the opening of the crossing points nor the sufficient entry of humanitarian aid as has been provided for in the agreement signed between the Palestinian Resistance Movement Hamas and the Zionist entity. In a statement played or relayed today by Palestinian media, MSF added that it has not seen any improvement in its ability to deliver aid, stressing that it comes up against the same obstacles. Stressing that it needed help before addressing the reconstruction of Gaza's hospitals, MSF said that the health in Gaza is facing the world's largest humanitarian and construction disaster of modern history, noting the presence of 70 million tons of rubble and about 20,000 pieces of an exploded ordnance. The Palestinian Resistance Movement Hamas has called for the opening of an urgent and thorough investigation into the torture of Palestinians whose remains the Zionist entity has returned, denouncing a heinous crime of genocide against the Palestinian people. The details with our colleague Saad Bougazi.
In a statement, the movement stressed that the atrocious images showing the bodies of the martyrs handed over by the Zionist occupier bearing clear evidence of torture, ill treatment and summary executions reveals clearly the criminal and fascist nature of the occupying army as well as the moral and human decadence into which the occupier has sunk, not making any distinction between the living and the dead among the Palestinians. Hamas said that the acts constituted a horrendous crime amounting to genocide, calling on international organizations defending human rights, including the United Nations and the Human Rights Council, to document these crimes, to open a complete and urgent investigation, and to bring the Zionist leaders before the competent international courts for their unprecedented crimes against humanity in contemporary history. For the past 2 years, the Zionist occupation has been carrying out an aggression in Gaza marked by massacres, starvation, destruction, and forced displacement, ignoring international appeals and orders of the International Court of Justice demanding its judgment. This aggression left more than 237,000 martyrs and wounded, the majority of them children and women, as well as more than 11,000 missing. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have been displaced, while a devastating famine claimed the lives of many people, including children, against the backdrop of massive destruction.
Shifting now to the Western Sahara file, where the Special Political and Decolonization Committee of the United Nations General Assembly has adopted during its 18th session a resolution without a vote on the Western Sahara issue under the agenda item relating to the implementation of the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. The fourth committee took note of the report of the Secretary General of the United Nations dated 31st of July 2025, submitted to the General Assembly at its current session, in which he reaffirmed that the Special Political and Decolonization Committee of the General Assembly and the Special Committee on the Situation with regard to the implementation of the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples addressed the question of Western Sahara as a matter of decolonization. It also recalled all General Assembly and Security Council resolutions on Western Sahara, including that establishing the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, MINURSO, under the authority of the Security Council. Through its resolution, the committee reaffirmed the inalienable right of all peoples to self-determination and independence in accordance as well as the responsibility of the United Nations towards the people of Western Sahara. And the Spanish Congress has rejected the recent amendment to the trade agreement between the EU or the European Union and Morocco made by the EU Commission, including products from Western Sahara in a blatant violation of the European Court of Justice ruling requiring prior consent from the Sahrawi people, according to Spanish media. The details again with our colleague Saad Bougazi.
The motion tabled by the Vox party against the amendment to the trade agreement between the EU and Morocco to include the territories of Western Sahara in the agreement has received the support of the Congress of Deputies, which rejects the European Commission's maneuver to circumvent the EU court ruling of 4th October 2024, which declared this practice illegal, the daily newspaper El Debate reported yesterday. According to the latter, the party led by Santiago Abascal has outlined a strategy to ensure the survival of the Spanish countryside, and among the measures requested has obtained the support of the lower house to advance one of its key demands framed within the defense of the interests of the primary sector and national production. Vox has in fact presented its plan to implement policies aimed at reducing structural dependence on non-European imports, eliminating unfair competition, promoting the consumption of local, and prioritizing food sovereignty, the same source noted. Commenting on this victory, the party said that this parliamentary support represents a success for Vox in defending Spanish farmers against unfair competition and the maneuvers of Brussels and Morocco to undermine European case law and harm the national primary sector. As a reminder, many MEPs and associations have denounced the new EU-Morocco trade agreement, arguing that the changes made were decided in defiance of the EU court's decisions and without their knowledge.
And finally, a UN committee of experts has said that France is responsible for serious and systematic violations of the rights of unaccompanied migrant children on its territory, where they are too often left to fend for themselves because they cannot prove their age. In a report published on Thursday, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, CRC, states that in France, many migrants who are unable to access the child protection system find themselves homeless, deprived of basic care, and living in degrading conditions. The CRC, whose 18 experts are responsible for ensuring that states promptly or comply with international treaties on the rights of minors, welcomes the fact that, in law, France considers unaccompanied minors first and foremost as children in need of care and protection. However, it notes that a large number of those who claim to be children are treated as adults, following age assessment procedures that are considered flawed. And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for weekly programs. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Thank you and goodbye.
Maqam Shahid, or the Monument of the Martyr in the capital Algiers, was built to remember all those who sacrificed their lives for the independence of Algeria from the then French colonial rule. Mohammed Khatil will tell us more about the Martyr's Monument.
Algeria fought the then French colonial rule for independence between 1954 and 1962, which was one of the most vital decolonization wars in the history of the country. It was a war that not only saw armies in action, but terrorism and torture in which Algerian civilians suffered. The war and those who sacrificed their lives for freedom are remembered in breathtaking monuments such as Maqam Shahid. Fighting for freedom is a worthy cause, but it is always marred by the loss of life that occurs during a war. Algerians gathered up their courage and fought valiantly for their right to be independent. And when looking at the monuments that stands as a reminder, one cannot shake the feeling of sadness and appreciation for those who paved the way for freedom. The massive size of the Maqam Shahid takes most visitors' breaths away. Located in Algiers, this monument is by far the most popular attraction in the city. It was erected in the 80s and consists of 3 huge palm fronds constructed from concrete, which start wide apart at the base and come together at the top of the monument. Maqam Shahid stands 92 meters into the sky. Each frond is a representation of the feeders that have developed the country, namely its industry, fascinating culture, and its successful agricultural sector. Visitors are able to walk around and underneath this colossal monument, which name means the place where the martyr rests. It is also referred to as the symbol of the unknown soldier and is dedicated to the fallen heroes of the war for independence. The Bois des Arcades, located near the Maqam Shahid, offers shaded areas for relaxation and also has magnificent views of the monument. It is an attraction that is of a great significant historical value to Algeria and is a recommended site in the city of Algiers.
بلادي بلادي الأمان الأمان.
The lofty Algerian revolution wrenched independence from colonial France.
بلادي بلادي الأمان الأمان. أغني علاك بأي لسان.
Algeria won independence from France in 1962 after a bitter revolutionary war that cost more than 1.5 million glorious Algerian martyrs.
جلالك تقصر عنه اللغة ويعجزني فيك سحر البيان.
The French troops had invaded the country in 1830 from the locality of Sidi Frej on the western coast of the capital Algiers.
أول بلد استعمر هو الجزائر وآخر بلد تخلص من الاستعمار هو الجزائر. فجمال الجزائر أغرى حتى المستعمرين فلم يريدوا الخروج منه ولم يريدوا أن ينسوا ما ذاقوا به من نعم.
By the time the colonial occupation was complete, Algeria's population had dropped from 6 million to about 3.5 million, a colonial genocide caused by mass killings, endemic disease, and utter poverty. Soon the country's most fertile lands was seized by colonial settlers, mostly for wine production. In 132 years of harsh French colonial rule, settlers developed a luxury lifestyle, and a stream of high-grade products went back to metropolitan France.
وهام بك الناس حتى الطغاة وما احترموا فيك حتى الزمانة وأغريت مستعمريك فراحوا يهيمون في الشرق بالصولجان.
That colonialism was a sheer disaster for the Algerian people. For example, in 1950, the literacy rate stood at 10% among the oppressed Algerian population. In 1830, it had been over 40%.
ولم يبرحوا الأرض لما استقلت شعوب ولم تستكن للهوان.
The National Liberation Front, FLN, started in 1954 as a small minority in the national movement that was committed to armed confrontation with colonial France.
وزلزلت الأرض زلزالها وضج لغاصبك النيران.
But the devastating violence of the French response to its early actions built popular support. Soon it became the dominant nationalist organization. Internal debates about how it was fighting for and how to win came to a head at the organization's Soumam Congress held in August 1956. It established a militant agenda calling for a social republic after Algeria's accession to independence, with serious social and economic reforms.
إليك صلاتي وأزكى سلامي بلادي بلادي بلاد الأمان الأمان. لتعيش حرا طول الزمن وطني 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 طال الثمن طال الثمن روحي مالي نفسي بدني روحي مالي نفسي بدني.
And he determined to take the liberation fight to the country's cities and towns. It was now that the Battle of Algiers began, employing both hit-and-run attacks against French colonial targets and worker strikes in the capital, where many Algerians lived crammed into the packed alleyways of the Kasbah. An 8-day strike paralyzed the city in January 1957, but was partially broken by brutal repression meted out by the French colonial army. The colonial war machine beefed up the heinous repression in March 1957, and numerous nationalist leaders were hunted down, savagely murdered, and forced into exile. But the brutality of the colonial repression won increased support for the Algerian Mujahideen, or freedom fighters. The armed revolution against colonial occupation pulled in and involved wider layers of Algerian society. Men and women were forced to re-examine their relationships. The post-independent government estimated that over 12,000 Algerian women had actively participated in the struggle for national liberation, with about 3% of these brave women fighting in combat.
استعمار في بلادنا نكسر سيف الظلم في الحروب هالقوة الشجعان ضحت الرجال في الغيب والصحراء وجبالنا تحيا الجزائر حرة ويحيا الشبان تحيا الجزائر حرة رجال ونسوان تحيا الجزائر حرة رجال ونسوان.
After the famous Battle of Algiers, the FLN strategy shifted to military confrontation in close coordination with the ALN, the National Liberation Army, which dealt severe blows to colonial forces in various parts of the country. The revolution became controlled from above. Urban trade unionists and students were encouraged to leave their places of work to join the liberation fight in the countryside as part of the global struggle against the oppressive colonial yoke. Yet it was the massive pro-independence demonstrations in December 1960 and 1961 that further brought the French authorities to negotiate with GPRA representatives, and what was known as the Evian Agreements was signed.